everybody, and welcome to the Pressroom. I'm Bart Padjasek, and I'll be your host this evening. And over the next half an hour, I'll not only fill in some hosting duties, play a bit of devil's advocate, and maybe a bit of a babysitter for these three. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. Andrew Brethauer from the Lloydminster Source, Jeremy Thompson from Newcap Television, and James Woods from the Meridian Booster. Thank you once again for joining us, guys, for our 2015 edition of the Pressroom. It's been a heck of a year so far.
It has, and it's mostly done now.
Mostly. Let's hopefully we get through the next half an hour, maybe through the rest of the year as well. We'll begin tonight with probably the biggest story that came out of City Council for sure, and probably the biggest talked about on social media. It was about a controversial contract between the City of Lloydminster and a former Mayor, Jeff Mulligan.
There's been mistakes made, and we are now taking steps to absolve that risk of anything like this ever happening going forward.
Owning up to a mistake. That's what a packed house at Lloydminster City Hall got to hear in October after the details of a controversial contract between the city and former Mayor Jeff Mulligan's company Aha Moments came to light. The public wanted answers. The deal, originally signed on July 22nd when Mulligan was still mayor, led to Aha Moments billing the city close to $60,000 over a period of 3 months, followed by the city forking over $120,000 in an early termination fee, which was eventually paid back by the former mayor. After agreeing publicly the contract was ill-conceived, the city is working on a new policy when it comes to future contracts. That's expected to be discussed again in January. And of course, this is some news that did break a little bit earlier this year, and it's a topic that's just been on the lips of a lot of people, especially in social media and especially at City Hall. Now, first of all, why did it take so long for this stuff to come out?
You want to take that one?
Well, yeah, from what I know, because a lot of this stuff happened before I myself arrived in the city, but from what we know, it was signed, and when it was signed, it wasn't exactly discussed publicly. When you look at the text of the meeting in which Mulligan did resign, you can see they go into a closed session, they go out of closed session, and then the resignation letter is presented, all it goes, and then after that, in the media reports and interviews he gave afterwards, he discussed that he's moving on to Aha Moments. But any discussion of a contract between the city and his company was never discussed publicly. Didn't seem to be so, and it only really came to light after a check seemed to have been made public in some way, shape, or form, and then circulated throughout the city. And that was back in, I think it was late 2013 that did occur, for that check being circulated around.
Yeah, and it took 2 years until we actually were able to do stories on it, because there was a Freedom of Information and Privacy form, I guess, submission made to the Saskatchewan office there, and someone had to go that far to get information as to what exactly did happen back in 2013, and it seemed as though the city was trying to cover something up, right? Mm-hmm. But obviously they didn't want to talk about it. They still don't want to talk about it. But it's clearly it was an important thing for the public to kind of hear and understand, and as to why it happened.
The thing was, when it came to how the city was handling it, it looked as though like a FOIP had gone forward and it had gone to the city to approve, and the city said no based off of it would be damaging, because under one of the parts of the Privacy Act, if it was damaging to a third party, they wouldn't release it, and they went with that route. And that's what the roadblock was, and it took someone else from outside. I think there was the gentleman, Ken Mexi. He was the one who filed the FOIP and then was denied, and then took it to the Saskatchewan Privacy Commissioner, and then the commissioner made his ruling, and it went from there. And that's why it only broke this year, the whole story in the first place, and put information out in the open, is because the Privacy Commissioner made that report public only 3 months ago, and that's when the whole thing started rolling for this year.
And even when the report did become public, the city was tight-lipped, whether cover-up or not, whatever you kind of want to call it. I know a lot of people are saying that the city really wasn't answering the questions about this, or at least the people's concerns.
They weren't. The very first report, because I filed the first report on the contract being made public, and when I went to go talk to the city about it, all I got was a very brief statement saying they followed the purchasing policy, and that was it. That's all they said. as to why they decided to go that way in terms of how they handled the discussion about that particular topic, I have no idea. I'm not privy to that kind of information why they handle it that way. But that's what they're doing.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the councillors clearly they were aware. They know, and the mayor they knew it was maybe not the best contract to have drawn up, and they were well aware that it didn't look good for them, and so I think there was just some kind of internal mitigating of how do we handle this now that it is out there and people are asking questions about it. So I mean, I can understand why they wanted some time to kind of gather themselves and prepare an answer, but it certainly did not look great when they had a meeting or a press release, I suppose, with all the press, and then didn't take any questions afterwards.
Yeah,
that was perhaps a bad move.
They never actually answered the question about what was he actually doing. That's the question today, that no one really has any idea about what was the contract for, what was the work he was doing. And so now that's 2 years ago and no one seems to remember, and it's, how do you forget something like that with that amount of money? And if you look back at all the contracts everybody signs, I'm sure if back 2 years ago they remember the work they're doing for the city, but no one understands, and city council, Jeff, no one can tell you, this is the work I was doing, this is what I was paid for.
This is why I got $60,000.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we can keep going on this all night. We'll have to kind of end this topic soon, but definitely more things will come out of this over the next coming year, so I think we'll look forward to that. Now, something that I know a lot of people weren't looking forward to is just the economic outlook for this year. Back in 2014, it did kind of start off as kind of wondering what it's going to be like, and unfortunately, the price of oil did start to tank.
The price of oil continues to tumble. It's a headline that news agencies have continued to use throughout the year. What began in 2014 as a concern for what's ahead, dropping to less than $40 a barrel, it began a major recession in the country and eventually led to layoffs. Here in Lloydminster, the downturn didn't only affect those who work in the industry, but other services as well. That leads many to wonder, when will it end?
That's right. It's the price of oil. It's definitely something we've been watching all year on our news boards, and unfortunately, it has really affected our city, especially as a border city that relies a lot on oil and gas industry. How have you guys kind of seen Lloydminster been affected?
Well, being the realtor of the group, it's obviously slowed up our market. It's destroyed our market in a sense, and I say that coming from last year where everything was booming, where you could go and sell a house in a day or two. Now it's taking a month, 2 months, 3 months if you're ahead of the market. And the biggest thing with that is that that's normal. And I think people aren't used to that. People are used to putting their house on a market for a very high price and it's selling within a week or so. And now it's almost like, oh, well, you're not going to make the $100,000 you made last year. You're going to make 40 and it's going to take you 4 months to do that. And now everyone's up in arms about that. And that's the biggest thing out of the oil, especially for me, is the real estate part of it. But then everyone's also the layoffs, the jobs lost. There's just so much affected in this city.
I'm thinking the most tangible part that I've noticed, especially recently around kind of the holidays, is specifically with the Salvation Army Food Bank. They've had immense troubles filling their shelves recently. Of course, everyone has stepped up in the city recently and started to donate more, but I've heard time and time again that they're seeing people who used to come to donate food come and request hampers, and it's just hit so many people so hard.
A lot of families being affected for this, absolutely. So it's unfortunately we can't really fix the oil crisis right now, especially in a half-an-hour period. But is there anything that we can maybe look forward to?
Well,
that might be a tough question as it is too.
Whenever you ask someone who's been in the city for a long time, they would say it eventually goes back up again. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm still new to the province of Alberta, still new to living in a town which is affected by the oil industry. But I guess if there's one thing to look forward to, it would be that it would go back up again, and that the good times will return. And there's still substantial investment in the oil industry that you can see in Lloydminster. So it's not like the Husky upgraders all of a sudden just going to shut down and go away. Mm-hmm. Right? So
the business is still around.
Yes.
And the thing is, when it does come back, I'm going to say boldly when it does come back up, hopefully, the province and the country is really trying to take steps towards diversifying the economy and what really affects and drives Alberta's economy. So that's definitely good to see as well.
But at the same time, people have to learn from their mistakes. And I think that's something we don't necessarily do here. They told me when I started doing real estate that every 7 years the market dips, and it does. If you look back in history, it does. But people still make the same mistakes. Money goes back up, people are buying toys, buying a lot of things, houses they don't need, and going on spending a bunch of money. And then when it dips down, now we see the problems that we have today, where people are just basically throwing keys on the table and walking away. So maybe it's time for a lesson from this and take it that money's not always going to be there. Those massive toys aren't always going to be there, and start putting away some money and finally having that, because it's going to come back again. It always does. It's oil. It's not a guarantee.
It's an interesting point, because this thing I've heard many times again, this is cyclical. Maybe we haven't seen a dip like this in a long time, but eventually oil goes down, oil goes up. It's something we have to live with. Hopefully, maybe we can learn some lessons out of this. Well, coming up after the break, we're going to go see how actually Canada and Alberta changed a bit on a political scale. Stay tuned.